And to discuss more on the story, we have with us Edward P. Joseph, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. He's a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University and is also the current executive director of the National Council on U.S.-Libya Relations. Thank you so much for taking out time and joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Now, I'd like to begin by asking you, we know we are expecting a response from Israel. PM Netanyahu has called for that over Iranian attack. Are we looking at a growing West Asia tensions that could now spill into an all-out war?
Well, it's possible. We are looking at potential escalation here. The dynamics are favorable for that. It's quite possible because a response from Israel to Iran's attack on Israel today of some almost 200 ballistic missiles could, of course, lead to an Israeli response. The question is, what kind of position is Iran in now after having launched this attack? We have to understand here that there was an exchange in April, a similar exchange that Iran launched about 100 ballistic missiles at that time. Most were intercepted, and Israel responded with a precision attack on a site in Iran, but there was no further escalation beyond that. This situation is very different. Iran has responded now, ostensibly because the military in Iran, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, is angry and believes that it looks weak, that the country looks weak by not having responded to the momentum that Israel has attained in Lebanon. But the problem is, Iran now has pretty much lost its main threat against Israel, which is Hezbollah itself. So Iran now is in the position of having given Israel an invitation to respond when Iran no longer has its primary deterrent, its forward deterrent in Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been reeling from this series of effective intelligence and intelligence-assisted attacks on the organization, including the loss of its longtime leader, Hassan Nasrallah. And now Israeli troops have entered into the south of Lebanon, potentially to create a buffer zone there. So Iran is really in a much weakened position. As your report suggested, you heard from President Biden, the U.S. is standing strong here in Israel's defense. You do not hear President Biden calling for the ceasefire that he did just 24 hours ago. So we're in a position here where Israel is poised to respond and could respond forcibly against Iran, but it's not sure that it will take that opportunity. Please.
All right. I'm glad you mentioned that, but Iran has said that this attack was in response to the killing of top leaders and a response for Israeli attack on Gaza and Lebanon. Could this also be an attack in a way for Iran to study Israel's defense system better, as it has warned of even larger attack? And I'm quoting Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff here. If Israel is not contained by the U.S. and Europe, considering that Israel will be fighting at multiple fronts now.
Well, of course, Iran is a threat. It retains a sizable inventory of ballistic missiles, about 3,000. But we have to remember, that is a limited number. Those ballistic missiles that Iran has is a limited number. It's already fired almost 200, and it's had almost no effect. Some of the missiles have gotten through Israeli defenses, assisted by the United States, but very few, and none have caused very much damage. In fact, the only fatality that I'm aware of that I read is a Palestinian who was killed by shrapnel from one of these intercepted Iranian missiles. In other words, the only casualty that Iran caused in Israel was to a Palestinian on the West Bank. So that's my information. So the Iranian attack here of this first wave, potentially of only a first wave of about 200 missiles, did not achieve very much, nor did the wave back in April achieve very much. So it remains a question of how effective Iran believes it can be. The outside risk here for Iran, of course, is that Israel, backed by the United States, could move up what we call the ladder of escalation. And this ultimately could pose a threat to the existence of the Iranian regime. So the forces within Iran, and the reports are that there's strong divisions within Tehran about how to proceed. So we don't know at this point. The ball now is in the Israeli court. It's up to the Prime Minister Netanyahu to decide how to respond. So far, though, the indicators are that he may not respond right away. Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that Israel will respond at a point, at a time and place of its choosing. So it could be that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to focus on the ground operation in Lebanon and then retain the right to respond to Iran at a later time. Please.
Right. And that being said, as you mentioned, Lebanon, Israel is fighting at multiple fronts now. Now, do you think it's capable of fighting at all these fronts? Of course, with the help of U.S. And if yes, how do you think U.S. is planning to support Israel?
Well, we'll take the latter question first. The U.S. has moved vessels into the region, including 2 destroyers that helped Israel today to intercept some of these almost 200 ballistic missiles from Iran. So the U.S. has forces in the region, but these are in a defensive posture. They're not at all participating in Israeli operations in Lebanon. In terms of Israeli capacity, the fighting in Gaza has thankfully been reduced, and Israel has been able to redeploy forces to the north. There's about a division that is on the border with Lebanon. That's about 10,000 troops, some of which have entered into Lebanon. We have to remember the purpose of this operation. It's not any type of expansionist agenda, as some academics have suggested. It's not that. Israel has long tried to establish a quiet situation on its northern border with Lebanon by creating a buffer zone, a space there. In fact, that was the purpose of a UN Security Council resolution 1701 that was adopted in 2006 after the last bout of fighting. So that's the aim. And whether the Israelis can accomplish that remains to be seen. Again, Hezbollah is in a weakened position, but of course it still retains a lot of fighters and they can operate autonomously. And of course, Hezbollah still also has its missile capabilities. Please.
Right. What I'm gathering from what you just said is, so there is a possibility of this whole war not escalating and Israel somehow thinking of let's go for a ceasefire?
Well, we don't know. The one option is, again, in this battle of overall objective between Iran and Israel to establish deterrence and reestablish deterrence. That's the initial objective of each side. Israel doesn't need to do that. Israel doesn't need to take additional steps. Why? Because it's already demonstrated with its ability to penetrate Hezbollah intelligence, with its intelligence, be able to penetrate the hierarchy of Hezbollah to get even to Nasrallah and his top lieutenants to pull off the pager and the walkie-talkie attack. It has managed to penetrate intelligence within the Hezbollah hierarchy, as it has as well in Iran, including with the hit that took out Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, who was in what was called a Iranian safe house. And yet Israeli intelligence managed to penetrate that and assassinate him, even though he was in Tehran. And today we see that Israel knew almost exactly the time of the strikes by Iran. And in fact, this was meant to be somewhat of a surprise, because the supreme leader, Khamenei, had signaled that Iran was not going to respond to the hit that was on Nasrallah. He had signaled in his speech that it would be up to Hezbollah to respond, not for Iran. And so this was somewhat of a feint, somewhat of a surprise, perhaps due to divisions within Tehran, demands from within the military, the Revolutionary Guard Corps insisting on some type of response. So this was meant to be a surprise, but it turned out it was not a surprise. Israeli defenses, backed by the United States, were prepared for this. And again, Iran has very little to show for this almost 200 ballistic missiles of its limited inventory that it has shot. Please.
Right. Now, a lot of experts do also say that, and reports also say that Iran was able to target military targets in Israel. Do we still think that Iran might not be, is not capable of retaliating even stronger if Israel does retaliate?
Well, there are questions about Iranian capabilities. Yes, it's true that they apparently there were these three primary targets that Iran was aiming at, and it didn't hit any of them. Again, according to my information, the only fatality was a Palestinian who was killed, unfortunately, by Iran's own attack. So it remains to be seen what are Iranian capabilities to effectively penetrate Israeli air defenses. Yes, some missiles managed to get through. It's true. Almost any air defense system can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. But again, Iran has a limited number of missiles. There's about the estimates say that it's about 3,000, perhaps somewhat more, but 3,000. So what does that mean? It means that if the sides go up the ladder of escalation, and remember, the United States is another party here, that ultimately Iran could be in a position where it runs out of its ballistic missiles aided by cruise missiles and drones. And then it would be completely vulnerable to U.S. and Israeli attack, including on its nuclear weapons program. So Iran has moved down a very dangerous course here. And that's probably why these reports are correct of divisions within Tehran. And of those, including apparently the new president, Pezeshkian, who was apparently caught in the dark about this attack and who had been on the side of those who had argued against it. Please.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Edward P. Joseph, for joining us and giving your perspective.
You're welcome.